Hey guys, today I'm covering a few exercise solutions for a common problem called snapping hip syndrome, otherwise known as dancer's hip. In video 1, I cover the internal variant, and in this video, I'm covering the external variant. This is where you're going to feel it more on the outside of your hip, commonly felt in the Bulgarian split squat or the lunge. First, we're going to warm up using a series of glute bridges and hinges. Here we're going for approximately 12 reps times 3 of the glute bridges with a 10-second isometric hold at the end, making sure the knee, hip, and shoulder is in line. For the hinges, we're hinging back with the hips until we feel a stretch in the hamstrings and the glutes. We're maintaining a straight spine and bracing the core and glutes at the same time to come back up. This is just to stretch and activate the posterior chain before we move on to the release work. You can do anything from 6 to 10 reps times 2 sets. Once you're done with that, we're heading to the mat to do the release work. So you can use the ball in an easier way if you're finding this far too painful, where your foot is in line with your knee and you're leaning back with your hands and you're pushing your knee out to the side and back in. I don't know if you can see this because Loki is waiting for the ball, but if you find that doable, the next version is then putting your foot on the knee, pulling that into a stretch and rolling side to side while you're in that stretch, which will be a little bit more intense. Go on then. So next you want to roll your hamstring for about 1 to 2 minutes per side. Here I'm using an 8 ball, which is basically a peanut ball, but you can also technically use a barbell or anything that's going to be able to get into the hamstring a little bit better than a simple roller. So next we're going to work on our strength and mobility, and we're going to begin with a single leg RDL. We're going to use the wall for support so that we don't have to focus so much on balance and more on depth. What we don't want to do is rotate around out to the side. We want to keep the hips nice and level so that we get a good glute and hamstring stretch. I'm aiming to get the dumbbell to stop around knee height so that I get a decent stretch. I recommend moving as far as you need to in order to get a good stretch in your glutes and hamstrings, but not so far as to end up rounding your lower spine and not feeling it as much in the leg. The hip airplane was originally instructed as an exercise that was done unsupported, but today I want to focus on stretching and strengthening the muscles without the need to focus on balance. The hip rotators play a big role in stabilizing this movement, so by using the wall we can focus on the feeling versus the balance. So I want you to focus on feeling the outer hip as you come down and bend the knee, and focus on feeling the inner thigh when coming up and straightening the leg. If that is easy for you and you have worked your way up to feeling strong in this exercise over several weeks or months, you can then start to load it by adding a dumbbell around the body like I'm showing here. Next, we will do some flexibility and strength supersets, starting with focusing on hip external rotation with an easy version, and if that is too easy, you can then move on to the intermediate version. Here you want to pull up the leg in one go so the knee and foot is coming up as one, and the stretch is felt on the outside of the hip, not the knee. If you do feel the knee, then pull the toes up towards the shin to reduce that sensation, and dosage-wise, we're going to go for as many reps as you need to feel a reduction of stiffness in the outer hip. For the elevated pigeon, focusing on hip external rotation, I'm using a table to get to the right level for me to feel a stretch, but you can use anything as low as a step near the ground to something as high as this to feel the outer hip. I'm focusing on keeping my hips level and again pulling my toes towards my shin. From here, I'm doing some hinges and stopping the movement before I compensate by rounding the spine so I feel all the stretch in my outer hip. At this point, we're going to use either a split squat or a Bulgarian split squat, whichever one you feel that does actually create this snapping sensation. And we're going to try to work with depth and tempo to relearn this movement after having released so much of the hips. This is not the same for everyone, so there may be other movements you want to use this method for. For example, for the split squat, we are tucking the hips under and focusing on good control of hip extension. We are then finding the level just above where the hip snaps and bracing the core and hips in order to hover isometrically for 5 to 10 seconds per rep. Again, dosage-wise, this depends on your fatigue and muscle engagement, but we will aim for 3 total working sets per side. The same goes for Bulgarian split squats. I tend to keep my hand on my hip in order to feel the snapping, as mine's not so intense. But what I do is I find the snapping sensation and stop the range of motion just before it snaps, and I move around with Bulgarian split squats with my body angle to find what works better. We're then doing an isometric finisher. This is an easy version, which is basically a side laying hip external rotation stretch. I am holding this isometrically against my hand for about 10 seconds, and then I'm going to do my reps. So I'm doing about 12 reps per side times 2. The harder version is doing isometric contractions in the 90-90 position, doing 10 seconds pushing into the ground and then 10 seconds pulling the knee toward the body and the body toward the knee. Usually we will go for 3 rounds total per side, and if this position is uncomfortable for you, then you can place a yoga block under your front leg. I would usually do all of these exercises, but if you're a beginner, I would pick just one of these versions, so either an easy version or a hard version, and do this a few times per week.